Okay, folks, today is July the 6th, and we are continuing to follow our course schedule that we hold up and refer to at the beginning of every class meeting every Monday and Wednesday morning. Today is July the 6th, and we have on schedule for today the epic story Beowulf from the Dark Ages. Now, before I go any further in the discussion today, let me tell you about a little change in class for Wednesday. Wednesday is July 8th, and we are scheduled to start talking about Dante's Inferno. That's part of the Divine Comedy. That's the third part, the one that's most often taught in college. But I will not be in class on Wednesday, so we will not do a Zoom class for Wednesday. We will just wait and do our next Zoom class 1 week from today on the 13th. What's happening, I will be at work, but I've been called to do another project. Hang on just a second. Okay. All right. Erica says yes, that she can hear us. Very good. All right. Thank you, Erica, for that. But anyway, I've been called to do another project and been asked to take on another issue on Wednesday. So we will not do a Zoom class on Wednesday the 8th. That's 2 days from today. We'll wait and take up Dante on the 13th. So that'll give you even more reading time. Let us also remind you that coming up before too long, your annotated bibliography research project is due. And that's due on the 20th. So you still have a couple of weeks to work on that. And do a good job with that. Do the best writing you can. Find the best 6 sources that you can find. Remember, I think we said this on the first day, our very first day together, that one good step toward asking yourself whether is this a good source I found online or not. The first good step is there a clearly stated author? Because in college level research, we really don't like anonymous sources. They're not always bad, but they often are pretty weak. So find sources with clearly stated authors. If you found a source that does not have an author, there's nobody taking credit for it, I would be leery of that. I would be concerned about that one and try to find a different one. So find the 6 best, strongest sources you can and follow the models in your syllabus packet. Pages 4 and 5 in the syllabus packet show you 2 different models for how each page should look. Page 4, I believe, is the example that I wrote when I was in college, and page 5 is the one from Ruth Mills, who was a Northwest Shoals student who did a very good job. So be working on that. That's coming up in a couple of weeks. All right. As I always do at this point, let me pause and ask if you have any questions. Does anybody have any questions about the course schedule? And of course, if you think of one later, you can always email me. Anybody like to ask a question now? Okay. All right. We are starting our second half of the semester. Exam 1 was the midterm point, middle of the semester point, this 8-week term that we're doing. Most of you did well on exam 1. If you turned in an exam 1 to me, you should have that back. I'll say that again. If you turned in an exam 1 last week, you should have that graded and sent back to you. I sent those back. I did most of the grading for that yesterday. So if you have not received that back from me, then I have not gotten an exam 1 from you. So, because I try to be pretty quick about grading and sending back. So most of you did a good job on your first exam. Today is Beowulf, and in your big envelope of notes that I mailed you at the beginning of the semester, you should have a page of notes for Beowulf. Hopefully you have those close by. I also meant to ask another question here, looking down the road a week or so. Let's see, Miss Mays, you might be able to help me there. Miss Mays, do you have that big envelope close by there that I mailed to you?
No, I don't.
Say that again, Miss Mays.
No.
So you don't have your envelope close by you there? We have.
Let me get it.
Okay. I think you were having a little audio issue. It's not your fault. I think we just have a bad connection. Miss Wallace, how about you? Do you have your the large envelope I mailed you? Do you have it close by you there?
Yes, sir.
Could you look in that envelope? And I know you should have a page of notes for Beowulf. Could you look a little bit past that and see if I sent a story from Chaucer called The Miller's Tale? Would you look in there and see if you can find The Miller's Tale? It would be a photocopy from a textbook, from a college textbook.
I don't see it.
Okay, and I think that was Miss Wallace talking there. Miss Mays, what we were asking you to look for also is just past the notes on Beowulf. See if I sent you a story called The Miller's Tale from Chaucer. It would be a photocopy from a college textbook. Miss Wallace said she did not see that in her packet. Do you, Miss Mays, do you see The Miller's Tale in yours? I think we have a poor connection with Ms. Mays. All right. Let's see. If I did not send, if I did not.
No.
Okay, go ahead, Ms. Mays. Maybe you're back there. Go ahead and speak to us. You there, Lauren? Okay, we'll go ahead and proceed. I think we've got a bad audio connection, and as always, if anybody needs to see the recording later, the video recording, I'll be glad to send you the link because it may be even a bad connection for you hearing me. But if we figure out that I did not send you The Miller's Tale, I will substitute that. I think that's not even in your book anyway. I think the one that's in your book is maybe The Pardoner's Tale or something like that. Okay. All right. Erica, you with us there again now?
Yes, I got it to work now.
No,
Okay.
I can't find it.
Okay, I think we have a better connection with Lauren now, and she says no, the Miller's Tale is not in your packet. Okay, that's fine. That's fine. Thank you, ladies, for checking on that.
I'm here.
Okay, all right, very good. So I think what I'll do is I'll send you a link. I won't have to send you a link. Instead of the Miller's Tale, I'm still looking at the course schedule for 7/15, what was originally scheduled for July the 15th. We might be a little bit delayed since I've got a missed class on Wednesday of this week on the 8th. But when we get to that point, instead of the Miller's Tale, I believe your book has the Pardoner's Tale. We'll talk about that one instead. All right. Sorry for that long delay there. I was just trying to look ahead a little bit. And because it kind of, in the back of my mind, it was nagging at me that I had not sent you that story when I mailed your packets. Okay, we're on page 124 today, 124 in textbook B. Also, I think I probably did send you notes on Beowulf. It's a rather long page of notes. I'll do a screen share right now that you can see. I can kind of point to the notes as we're discussing this. And hopefully you have your copy there where you can jot down notes in the margin if you need to. We always encourage you to do that. That's good active learning. And okay, so Beowulf Now, if when I redo the notes, I will italicize rather than underline. Italics is the more modern way. Here's something you might jot down at the top of your notes. Don't write yet. I'm setting you up for it here. A lot of people will ask, why is Beowulf important? What's good or what's important or what's significant about this long story? This long story has, almost no women present. There's almost no females present. It's just a bunch of men fighting and trying to, to be tougher than one another. What is the point of Beowulf? Why do you study this in high school? Why do you study it in college? And here is the quick answer of why Beowulf is important. And I didn't even put it on the note. So in class, I always have students jot this down at the top of the page. Beowulf is very important. It's very significant because it is our first example of English literature or British literature. It is the beginning of 1,000 years of a rich tradition in English literature. So that's why Beowulf is important. It is the very beginning of what we know as English or British literature. All right, so far we haven't been in any British or English literature. We had Hebrew with the Old Testament. We had the Greeks with the Odyssey and Oedipus the King. We looked at a little bit of literature from the Roman time period, that being the New Testament, although technically the New Testament was also written in Greek. So now we're coming up closer to a culture that we know a little more, a culture that's a little bit closer to our country. Now it's still pretty far away because the story of Beowulf dates to about 1000 AD. So to us, it's still a very, very old story. But it is the beginning of what will eventually become English or British literature. All right, where are we historically? Let's think about a time period. Where in world history are we? The Roman Empire eventually declined about probably about 500 AD. And then you get into a period after the Roman Empire, you get into a period known as the Dark Ages. History professors used to call it the Dark Ages quite a bit. Sometimes now teachers don't like that name, the Dark Ages, and they will refer to it as the early Middle Ages. Either one is fine with me, the Dark Ages or the early Middle Ages. So the Middle Ages, broadly defined, are from about 500 to about 1500 AD. That's the big wide scope of the Middle Ages, from about 500 to about 1500 AD. That's in broad, very wide terms. So what part of that do some people call the Dark Ages? Well, the part of that that's usually known as the Dark Ages are the time period between 500 and 1000 AD. Between about 500 and 1000 AD, that's known as the Dark Ages or the early Middle Ages. Now, I asked in class one time here at the Phil Campbell campus, down in my classroom, we can hold about 30 students in that classroom. And I asked one time in class, when we got to this point in the semester, why do some historians refer to this ancient time period, the time period that gave us the story of Beowulf, why do they refer to it as the Dark Ages? And we had one very friendly country boy here on campus. I won't call his name, but I'll say he was a proud graduate of Phillips High School over at Bear Creek. And everybody liked him. He was very friendly. And when I asked that question, why is that time period called the Dark Ages? He spoke up and tried to give an answer. And he said, well, I'll tell you why it's called the Dark Ages. He said, because back in them days, there wasn't no electricity. And at night, everything got real dark. And that was his answer. Well, that's a funny answer. And I guess it's technically true. There was no electricity in the time that the story of Beowulf was written. But that's not why it was called the Dark Ages. Historians call it the Dark Ages not because there was no electric light, but because it seems to be a very low point in education and learning and scholarship and writing. There seems to be less education and writing and awareness and literacy during that time than at almost any other time in world history. But Beowulf is our very best example of literature of the Dark Ages, or the early Middle Ages, if you prefer it to be called that. It's our very best example. The story I told you a few minutes ago is the beginning of what we know as English literature, okay? But the story, ironically, is not British. It is not English originally. Note number 1 up here. Hopefully you can still see the screen share. Note number 1 tells you that this story is originally Scandinavian. You see that word right there, Scandinavian. That's a very important word. Be sure to underline it or circle it there on your notes. Scandinavian means the Germanic countries of Northern Europe, the high, cold countries of Northern Europe. Now, I have 3 of them listed there, and I very rudely forgot to put one in, and we can add it. You can add it with your pen or pencil. I have described Scandinavian countries as Sweden, Denmark, and Norway. Well, I have to apologize to the country of Finland. I should have absolutely included Finland, Finland, because Finland is also a Scandinavian country. I did not mean to discriminate against Finland. The Finns whip everybody's rear end in the Winter Olympics. They are a proud, very smart people. So should be Sweden, Denmark, Norway, and at least Finland. We should add that 4th country. That's called the Scandinavian part of Europe, the cold, high northern countries that all speak Germanic languages. The story of Beowulf really was invented there. It starts there because it's the story of the people known as the Geats, Geats. Let me see if I can find that word on your notes here. I cannot believe if I have not put that word on the notes. Geats. Beowulf is a Geat. Well, the Geats, that's not a word we use nowadays. Who are those people? I'm going to point on the notes here. The Geats were the people that we nowadays call the Swedes. They were people from modern day Sweden, a warrior culture from modern day Sweden. So the Geats roughly equal the Swedes or the Swedish people. Now, the other group we see in the story of Beowulf, those people are the Danes, people from Denmark. Now, that name is the same from ancient times till now. Denmark, a very well-known Scandinavian country. If you're from Denmark, you're known as a Dane. So you have the Danes and you have the Geats. Those are the 2 big groups of people we see in the story of Beowulf. So this story clearly is Scandinavian. It's clearly Northern European before it was ever written down in England. What happened was this story was what we call oral literature. It was recognized as passed on word of mouth from person to person in the ancient days. But somewhere along about 1000 AD, we're still in note number 1 here, somewhere about 1000 AD, in the time period known as the Dark Ages or early Middle Ages, the story drifted over to England. And we know that someone came from Northern Europe and told the story in England because pretty soon after, a British monk, a monk is an educated man of the Catholic Church, he wrote the story down for the first time. The story had been told probably for hundreds of years, just person to person without being written down. But the first person to ever write the story down in careful detail was a British monk, an English monk, who wrote it down about 1000 AD. And that is the version that has survived throughout history. So the story is actually Scandinavian, that is Northern European originally, but it's counted, it's lumped in with English literature. It kind of acts as the beginning of English literature because it was an English person, a British person, who first wrote it down and kind of gets some literary credit, although that monk did not invent the story. He wrote it down as he heard it. Now, what was the language? What was the original language that this monk used? This monk would have spoken and would have written what we call Old English. If you look at the top of page 124 in your textbook, you see an example of what Old English looks like. Old English is very, very different from modern day English. Old English is the language of England from about 450 AD to about 1100 AD. It is also known as Anglo-Saxon, if you want to make a note of that. Old English is another name for Anglo-Saxon. That's ANGLO-SAXON, Anglo-Saxon. Anglo-Saxon and Old English are roughly equivalents. That's the language of England from about 450 AD to about 1100 AD. This very time period that we're talking about right here today. Okay. After that, about 1250 AD, we get into another period of English that's known as Middle English. That's the English of Geoffrey Chaucer and Sir Gawain, two other authors later on our syllabus. About the year 1500, we get into a third time period of English known as PDE, present day English. And that's the English that we know about. Even though the language of England in 1500 still sounded kind of old fashioned to us. If you want an example of the earliest present day English, look at the King James Version of the Bible. That's present day English, but it's old to us. That's from about 1611. So it seems old fashioned to us. So Old English, Middle English, present day English, three distinct time periods. Beowulf, though, is very much Old English. At the top of page 124 in your book, you can see that Old English, also known as Anglo-Saxon, doesn't really look and sound anything like English now. Gomen gleobimes geond shall swinjde bersted bete. I mean, it's like a foreign language. It's far closer to German than it is modern day English. What that means, if you drop down to the second section, is that joyful singing would shoot through the hall, beat his feet in the yard. I mean, you know, we wouldn't really know that at all because Old English is so far into us. There are a few words that are the same, that are spelled the same between Old English and present day English. A few words you could recognize, but most of them are quite unfamiliar to us. For example, our word father, F-A-T-H-E-R, our word father. In Old English, the word father is faeder, F-A-E-D-E-R. So it kind of looks the same, but not really. All right, what is the basic story of Beowulf? Some of you may have studied this in high school. Beowulf, as we said, is a Geat. He is from the country that would eventually be called Sweden. And he is a great warrior. He's called a Thane, a great warrior. His cousin or his uncle, depending on what book you're reading, what translation you're reading, his cousin or his uncle is the king of the Geats, Hygelac. And so Beowulf is not only a great warrior, he is also part of the royal family of the Geats. But Beowulf, as a brave, very great warrior, hears that their cousins, the Danes, over the sea, over the sea a little ways, that their genetic cousins, the Danes, people of Denmark, are having trouble with a terrible monster, a fierce monster that is terrorizing their land. And that monster is named that monster is named Grendel, G-R-E-N-D-E-L. Grendel is a mysterious but very dangerous and very strong night prowler, a night stalker, a serial killer. What is Grendel? What kind of monster is he? Well, that's always a little bit of a mystery. We know that Grendel is part human because we're told in the story that he is a descendant of Cain in the Old Testament, the very first murderer, Cain, who killed his brother Abel. So part of him is human, but there's part of him that's a demonic evil spirit as well. He is part human, part demonic spirit, evil spirit, and he's also animal-like. It's almost like he's part grizzly bear or Kodiak bear because he's great big and he's strong. So he is this strange sort of amalgamation or hybrid of a creature. And he terrorizes the land. He lives in an underground cave with his mother. And as far as we know, there are only two of these creatures, Grendel and his mother. And one thing that gets Grendel stirred up is when he gets angry at King Hrothgar, the king of the Danes, and all of Hrothgar's soldiers, when they are in the hall of Heorot, celebrating and drinking beer. Beer is called mead, M-E-A-D in this story. And they're drinking and celebrating and having a good time and celebrating the 4th of July. I'm kidding about that. I don't think they had 4th of July in the ancient world. But they're celebrating and drinking and having a good time, and that really bothers Grendel. It just burns him up, because what you discover if you read carefully is that deep down inside, Grendel is very lonely. He is a very lonely creature, and he is strong and he is dangerous, and he is a cannibal. He eats human flesh. He drinks human blood. He crunches on human bones. And he is a terrible villain. He is a monstrous villain. And when he gets angry and gets stirred up, he comes up out of the swamp, out of his cave and out of his swamp. The way it's described is a little hard to understand, because you have to dive down into the swamp deep, and then you get to a cave that's somehow open and not full of water. I don't even know how that's possible, but that's the way the poet, the English monk, describes Grendel's place that he lives, is down at the bottom of a deep swamp. Somehow it opens up into a cave where you can actually breathe air. So he and his mother live there. So Grendel will come up out of that swamp when he hears King Hrothgar of the Danes and his men celebrating and drinking and singing and having a good time. And he, at night, when King Hrothgar's soldiers are trying to sleep, Grendel sneaks into the camp and grabs several of them and kills the men and carries their bodies back to his lair, back to his cave, where he eats the flesh and drinks the blood. So he is very feared. We find out in the story that Grendel has terrorized the Danes for 12 years. Your story says 12 long winters. You notice that all the references to cold weather and snow and ice, because this is a story from Northern Europe, a very cold climate, Scandinavia. So Grendel has terrorized the Danes for 12 long years. And across the sea, over in Geatland, what we nowadays call Sweden, Beowulf, a great young warrior, has heard about this. And he hopes that he might assemble a small group of soldiers. We call them, down in note number 4, the Comitatus band, a small hand-picked trained band of warriors who travel the land as bounty hunters, special forces, or hired mercenaries. They're almost like the old Western term of a posse, a group of men who are going to solve something that's a problem, who are hunting an outlaw. So Beowulf assembles his small group, a Comitatus, a group of about himself and 14 men, to sail over to Denmark and try to offer assistance and help to King Hrothgar. Because clearly Hrothgar, who is a good king and a brave king, he has not been able to get rid of Grendel. Grendel's too strong for him and his men, even though Hrothgar's got a good army there. Beowulf decides to go and help, to lend his services. Beowulf is not only doing this to be a good neighbor, that's part of it, to be a good neighbor, but he is also trying to go help kill Grendel, because it will gain him fame and glory. Let me see if I have the word here. Right here in note number 8, you see where I'm pointing? The Old English or Anglo-Saxon word loth, L-O-F. We get our modern day word love from that, but that's a very different word in Anglo-Saxon. Loth means achieving fame and glory by being brave in battle. That's what it meant in the ancient world. So Beowulf is wanting to be a good neighbor and help out King Hrothgar and the Danes. Hrothgar's name, by the way, as some of you might know, starts with an H, Hrothgar. The first H is silent. Hrothgar is how it's pronounced. He does want to be a good neighbor, Beowulf does, but another very real part of his motivation for going to fight Grendel is achieving that word right there, achieving fame in glory in battle so that he will be famous forever as one of the world's great warriors. All right. So note number 2, back up at number 2, there are 2 narrative sections of Beowulf. Section 1, where Beowulf kills Grendel, and that should be and Grendel's mother. Beowulf does not kill his own mother. That's not what I mean there. But Beowulf kills Grendel and then later Grendel's mother. Because after Beowulf kills Grendel, then the mother comes for revenge, and she is both meaner and smarter than her son Grendel. And Beowulf has to go after her and track her down. So Beowulf is successful in his battle against Grendel. That's his first major battle. Battle against Grendel's mother, second major battle. And then after he goes back home, eventually when King Hygelac of the Geats dies, Beowulf becomes king later on and is king for 50 years. You know, a suspiciously round number right there. But Beowulf has a third major battle in his life, and that's when he's an old king back in Geatland. He has to do battle with a fire-breathing dragon who is terrorizing the land. So Beowulf, over the span of his life, has many, many battles, but 3 major battles, 3 really big battles that he's known for: Grendel, Grendel's mother, and the dragon. So you have the symmetry of 3. As well as Beowulf being king for 50 years. You can study note number 3 on your own. Totemic symbols, that means shamanism, animal spirit power. I get into that a little bit. I've already kind of explained to you what happens. Number 4, comitatus bond means a small band of warriors, not a huge army. Comitatus is the equivalent of what we nowadays call in the military special forces. Or special forces operation, where you take in a small group of men, could be men and women now, but traditionally men, and you get in and out of a country before anybody even knows you're there. You don't send a huge army in that will make a big noise. It's a small group in and out before anybody knows. All right. Note number 5, warriors of this period in Scandinavian history wanted to die bravely, either in battle, exploration, or other manly adventure. These were the original Vikings. Vikings were the warriors of Scandinavia in the Dark Ages. Big, tough, rough, tough guys. I mean, they didn't care a whole lot about intellectual study and broadening your mind. They were just all about physical warfare. You know, if they didn't have a sword at hand, they would cut your guts out with a rock, a dull rock. Reach in there and grab your heart while it's still beating and show it to you. Just mean, tough sons of bitches right there. I'm sorry, forgive me for that. I got carried away a little bit there, but that's what they are. Really, I mean, some of those warriors like you see in Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones is part of that, is largely based on stories like Beowulf, with these kinds of warriors who are not so much about improving their mind, but rather they are all about physical strength and warfare and conquering that way, and domination. Number 7, the Vikings believed if a warrior died bravely, he would live with the gods and fight the frost giants and other evil forces in one final apocalyptic battle known as Götterdämmerung. That's a German word that means twilight of the gods. We have on the notes right there. All right. Note number 11 is pretty good. In Beowulf, we begin to see references to giants, land monsters, water monsters. And my question there is, were there ever such things on the earth? And probably yes. The book of Genesis refers to both large water creatures, something like we would now think of as maybe the Loch Ness Monster. Most likely that is the dinosaur known as the plesiosaur. which swam in the oceans of the world in ancient times. It looked like a dragon, had a long dragon head, the plesiosaur. If any of you have ever been to the McWane Science Center in the museum, the Science Museum for Children in Birmingham, it's for kids, but I love it. I've been there myself. Up on the dinosaur floor, they have a complete fossil of a plesiosaur that was discovered near Birmingham, Alabama. And you may think, how in the world does a dinosaur that swims in the ocean, how does his fossil end up near Birmingham? Well, of course, at one time, water covered what is now Alabama. It was all ocean at one time. So that's how it ended up there. That's probably the creature that people have seen throughout ancient times as being what they call a water dragon or leviathan, meaning the great water beast, probably the plesiosaur, maybe a giant whale, something like that. What about human giants, though? Were there ever such creatures in the world? Well, there's lots of references to them in literature. Even just the book of Genesis refers to Goliath, the giant whom King David fought when David was not even a king, it's just a boy. David killed Goliath. Goliath was almost 9 feet tall. He was very, very tall, a Philistine giant. In the book of Genesis, we also learn about a race of giants known as the Nephilim. That's a Hebrew word that's, let me see if I can spell it in my head, Nephilim, I think is how it's spelled, the Nephilim. That means giants without a human soul. The book of Genesis references that those giants roamed the earth at one time. So Beowulf is fascinating because of all of these mysterious references and all of the action. Let me just try to summarize a little of it here. I know we've been here almost 45 minutes. The story begins at the bottom of 124. It was originally, as we said, written in Old English or Anglo-Saxon, so we have to have a modern English translation to understand what's going on. Let me leave the screen share and just go back to our regular view right here. Okay. What we see on 124 is we learn, it begins with a funeral, the funeral of a Danish king named Scyld Sheafson in line 4. Scyld Sheafson, a famous Danish king. So you get the description of a royal funeral, how all the honors that were given to this king who started life as an orphan, a foundling. And we see on 125 that he is put on a boat, on a ship. They're going to push him out into the ocean, and they pile up all this gold and treasure around his body. All of these weapons, these swords and shields. You almost see the idea there that kind of like, I guess, in Egyptian culture, where a famous dead person can take stuff with them to the afterlife, that they should be buried or should be sent out to sea on a boat with all of this treasure and all of these goods because somehow they could take it with them. That seems to be the implication. So pages 124 and 25 just show us an example of Scandinavian culture in the form of the funeral for a Danish king. The real action begins on page 126 with the chapter called Herod is Attacked. Now, the Hall of Herod is a big dining hall, a mead hall, a beer drinking hall where they'd have feast and celebration, and soldiers would even sleep in this. They'd put their pallets down and sleep on the floor. There's even an upstairs area. King Hrothgar of the Danes has built a magnificent mead hall or beer drinking hall called Herod. And we find that it becomes unsafe to stay in this hall, this big building at night. Right in the middle of page 126 in the chapter that's called Herod is Attacked, then a powerful demon, a prowler through the dark, nursed a hard grievance. It harrowed him or harassed him to hear the din, That's the noise of the loud banquet every day in the hall. The harp being struck in the clear song of a skilled poet, telling with mastery of man's beginnings. Back on your notes, the poet who would entertain crowds and sing and tell stories about the past was called a scop, S-C-O-P. That word is down near the bottom of your notes. So when does Grendel attack? Grendel attacks when he hears men having a good time, having celebration and fellowship up at the Hall of Herat. And he is described here as a powerful demon, a prowler through the dark. He is your worst nightmare. He makes all of those monsters from Stephen King, like Pennywise the Clown from the novel It. Grendel makes Stephen King's monsters look like sissies. He kicks them in their rear end and sends them home to their mamas. That's how evil and how bad Grendel is. Grendel is your worst nightmare. He sneaks around in the dark, waiting to attack. We get a long description of Grendel at the bottom of 126 and over on 127. How he is part human, but part demonic spirit and part animal. And he despises regular humans. He hates their friendship. And as I told you before, what you begin to realize is that Grendel is essentially a very lonely creature. He's tormented by his loneliness. For 12 years, he has terrorized the Danes. We see at the bottom of 127. And he has vowed spite and revenge and nonstop terrorism against the Danes. On page 128, line 164, so Grendel waged his lonely war, inflicting constant cruelties on the people, atrocious hurt. Well, the next chapter is where Beowulf shows up. He hears that his neighbors, the Danes, are having a hard time with this creature known as Grendel. So the next chapter is called The Hero Comes to Herat. The hero is Beowulf, a great young warrior who hopes to help his neighbors, but also gain achievement and fame and glory for himself. You see where he comes from, top of page 129, line 195. He comes from Geatland, or as we said, modern-day Sweden. He is a thane, or a soldier of King Hygelac, who also happens to be his kinsman, a cousin or an uncle, depending on what translation you're looking at. We find out that he doesn't go alone. He enlists the help of 14 others near the top of 129. That's 14 of his very best soldiers, men who will fight with him and not question orders, who will go into the jaws of death for him. So it's 14 plus 1. 14 of the best soldiers from Geatland plus Beowulf. Page 130, when we see Beowulf and his comitatus band leaving for Denmark, they are dressed for success. They look like awesome warriors. And when they get to the coast of the Danish coast, the coast of Denmark, the Coast Guard, the man who is the sentry looking out over the water, watching for attacks, he thinks that Denmark is being attacked. He sounds the alarm, and very quickly Beowulf has to say, no, listen, we're not here to attack. We're not invading your country. We're not here to fight you. We're here to help you. We're here to fight with you, to work with you to get rid of Grendel. So they have to clear up that little misunderstanding. Page 132, Beowulf makes his introduction to King Hrothgar. The truth is Hrothgar already knows a little something about Beowulf because Beowulf is a famous warrior. We find out that King Hrothgar has known some of Beowulf's relatives, some of his older kinfolk. So there is a connection, kind of a cultural connection there, a family connection. We find out on page 134 that on the first night of their introduction, Beowulf makes a very bold proclamation. In front of everybody, he says, when I come across Grendel, this demonic spirit and evil villain who's been terrorizing your land, I will not only fight him bravely, I will use no weapons. I will fight him hand to hand. since Grendel uses no weapons, just brute strength, I will use no weapons, just brute strength. And I always think, I don't know about that. I don't know if that's very smart. Maybe you should use weapons. Yeah, Beowulf's not going to carry any weapons. He's not even going to carry his trusty Glock 40 caliber pistol in there. He's just going to go hand in hand. Later, they have a feast in the Hall of Herod, page 135 and following. You do meet a character named Unferth down about line 500, Unferth, Unferth, who he is one of King Hrothgar's Danish warriors. And even though Beowulf is there to help everybody, Unferth does not like Beowulf. He sees Beowulf as an intruder, as an interloper, as a guy who's just come over here to brag and boast and try to increase his reputation. But here's what we learn about Unferth. Unferth is just jealous. Unferth is a warrior, but he's not as good a warrior as Beowulf. And Unferth is known in classic literature as the Miles Gloriosus, which means the bragging soldier in Latin. Unferth is a soldier who is not very smart, but he does love to drink, and he loves to fight, and he loves to bully people. He's basically a bully. He's not a very kind person, not a likable person. He's the guy who's always drunk and threatening to burn your house trailer down, that kind of guy. You know, he's that sort of fella. Nobody much likes Unferth. And Unferth gets drunk and pops off to Beowulf and insults Beowulf. And Beowulf is reserved. You know, Beowulf could give him a whipping right there, but Beowulf just tries to calm everybody down and diffuse the situation, not escalate the situation. The fight with Grendel begins on 139 and following. The real action is on 140 and 141. And sure enough, it is a violent confrontation that very night. Grendel comes into the Hall of Herod and he reaches down to grab one of the warriors, to grab him up and tear him to pieces and drink the blood and eat his flesh. And he doesn't realize that he's reached out and he's grabbed a hold of Beowulf. And Beowulf clasps Grendel's arm like that. As Grendel's reaching forward, Beowulf clasps his arm like that. And he won't let go, and he won't let go. Instinctively, Grendel knows, I've never come across strength like this. This is not a normal person. So Grendel tries to pull back. He tries to pull back and get away, but Beowulf won't let him go. He won't let his arm go. He's got him in a tight hold, just like that. And Beowulf keeps pulling and keeps pulling until he rips, I'm not kidding, folks, he rips Grendel's arm right out of the shoulder socket. It is bloody. It is graphic. You hear tendons and ligaments and bones popping in the description. Rips the monster, the villain's arm, clean out of his shoulder socket. So that leaves Grendel with a terrible and mortal, that's deadly wound. He's bleeding out. Literally, he's bleeding out. So Beowulf is left with Grendel's arm. Grendel, now that his arm's ripped out, runs back into the swamp, back to his cave. Later, Beowulf will find Grendel's dead body there in that cave. He makes it back to the cave where he lives with his mama, but he dies. He's from blood loss, I guess. So what do you do with his arm, this severed arm? Well, Beowulf and his men and the Danes tie a rope around it and hoist it up, throw the rope over one of the ceiling trusses and hoist it up. And you got this arm that's kind of like a trophy, this bloody, dripping arm hanging from the ceiling in the Hall of Herod as a sign of victory that surely Grendel has been defeated, and he has. And there's great celebration on page 143. The celebration at Herod, that chapter is called. A long celebration and praise for Beowulf, who has fought so bravely. But of course, what no one knows is that Grendel is not the only monster out there. Grendel has a mother who is both meaner and smarter than he is. And she is now angered, and she will come for revenge. So that sets up Beowulf's second great battle. He and his men will have to go and track her down in that cave. And that encounter, that battle is much more dangerous than even Grendel. So that's the way the story runs here. For example, on page 156, the chapter Beowulf fights Grendel's mother. You kind of see from the chapter headings what's going to happen there. After Grendel's mother comes and kills some of the Danish warriors for revenge, Beowulf basically says, I don't do a job halfway. Come on, men, let's saddle up. Let's go get her. And that starts his journey to go and find Grendel's mother, setting up his second major battle of his life. Page 165, Beowulf returns home after he has defeated Grendel and Grendel's mother. Hrothgar gives Beowulf gold and treasure and payment for his bravery. And Hrothgar tells Beowulf that, you know, one day you will make a great king. You will be a great king to your people. If you go to 174 in your textbook, as we get toward the end of the story, on 174, there is a section that begins The Dragon Wakes. And this is after Beowulf, many years have passed by, 50 years have gone by, after Beowulf has been king of the Geats for 50 years. And what he finds is that there is an ancient dragon that lives in Geatland. This dragon is 300 years old, and the dragon literally can breathe fire. Well, as long as everybody leaves the dragon alone, the dragon doesn't hurt anybody. The dragon stays in its own cave. The dragon actually guards a big pile of gold and treasure. What a dragon wants with gold and treasure, I don't know. But the dragon minds his own business and stays in that cave. Well, what do you think, folks? Do you think anybody can leave the dragon alone? What would happen nowadays? Nope. Somebody's gonna make a bad decision after too many Bud Lights. You know, every bad decision in life begins with Bud Light. And let's go get that dragon. Let's go mess with that dragon. Well, that's exactly what happens. Some drunk people mess with that dragon, and now the dragon is terrorizing Geatland. He's going around breathing fire and burning people, you know, into toast. So King Beowulf has to assemble another comitatus, a group of men to go and defeat the dragon. Well, the dragon is so frightening and so big and dangerous that all of Beowulf's men, even though they're supposed to be brave men, they all run away when they see the dragon. They are terrified. The only people who stay to fight the dragon are King Beowulf himself and one loyal man named Wiglaf, W-I-G-L-A-F, Wiglaf. And together, Beowulf and Wiglaf do manage to fight the dragon with swords and stab the dragon enough to kill it. But the dragon breathes fire and burns King Beowulf so badly that his injuries will be mortal injuries. He will die from these severe burns. So before he dies, Beowulf announces that Wiglaf will be the next king because he was the only warrior brave enough to stand and fight the dragon in the face of such terrible danger. All right, so let's try to sum up now. What's the good of this story? Just as a story, I don't know that it's that good of a story. I mean, there's fighting, there's adventure, there's men drinking and boasting and bragging. You know, typical kind of bad boy behavior, fraternity boy behavior in this story. So it may not be really the best story around, but here's, you know, why I told you it was famous. Here's why it keeps showing up in textbooks, because it's an important historical document. It is a story that came from Northern Europe. It was written down about 1000 AD, and it becomes our first written example, a milestone, a milepost for the beginning of English literature as we know it, a tradition that follows all the way down to the modern day, to us. So that's why people continue to study it. And also it is a great example of the Anglo-Saxon language. We can study a lot about that earliest form of English from a document like Beowulf. All right. Any questions here at this point before I make final announcements for today? Anybody like to ask a question? Okay, then continue working on your annotated bibliography project. Remember, we will not do a Zoom class Wednesday morning at 10:15. Wednesday's the 8th because I'll be busy with another project here on campus. So we will be back together on the 13th, and we'll just postpone Dante. We'll push everything on your course schedule down. In other words, we're not taking anything away right now. We're just postponing Dante until the 13th. So that'll also be there in textbook B. And we'll continue to study. You know, we've got just a few more weeks together to work together here. Anybody, any question or anything you'd like to say before we close the meeting? Okay, I know we've had a bad connection. I know some of you had a tough connection, a bad connection hearing and seeing. Probably what I'll do, folks, is I'll send everybody, all of you and those who are absent, a link to today's class. And if you don't want to watch it again, if you were able to see and hear well enough, you don't have to watch it. I'll send it in case you need it, in case you need a clearer video to watch of today's class. But if you don't need it, you can just delete that email. All right. Thank you for coming to class today. Keep reading, keep studying, and we'll see you soon.